The acrid smell of burning circuits and twisted metal filled the cramped quarters of the diplomatic transport Harmony's Edge as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison pulled himself from the wreckage of his navigation console. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red shadows while warning klaxons screamed their electronic distress throughout the ship's corridors. "Status report," he called out, his voice cutting through the chaos as he surveyed the damage to the bridge. The diplomatic mission to the Zephyrian home system had been routine. A simple escort duty for the Alliance's first formal trade negotiations with the enigmatic alien species. Now it looked like their routine mission had just become a survival situation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra. "Special for you! Hull breach on Deck 3, sir," reported Ensign Parker, her fingers dancing over emergency controls. "But containment fields are holding. Main engines are offline, and we're running on backup power only." Jake grimaced, checking his tactical display. The Zephyrian vessel that had been escorting them, the Starwind Dancer, was maintaining position nearby, apparently undamaged by whatever had caused their systems to fail. Through the viewports, he could see the elegant alien ship, its biomechanical hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed almost like a written language. "Sir," Parker continued, her voice tight with concern, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian vessel. They're offering assistance, but—" She paused, consulting her readings. "Their language matrix is unlike anything in our databases. The universal translator is having difficulty with their formal diplomatic protocols." "Put them through," Jake ordered, moving to the communication station. He'd studied Zephyrian culture during his preparation for this mission, but he'd never expected to need that knowledge under emergency conditions. The aliens were known for their complex social hierarchies and ritualistic approach to all interactions, traits that made negotiations challenging even under the best circumstances. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of the Zephyrian bridge. 3 figures stood at the center of the elegant space, their tall, graceful forms draped in flowing robes that seemed to shift color in the alien ship's lighting. All 3 were clearly female by human standards, though Jake knew that Zephyrian gender distinctions were far more complex than simple binary classifications. The central figure stepped forward, her movements liquid and precise. Her skin held a subtle blue-green iridescence that shifted like oil on water, while her hair, if it could be called hair, flowed around her shoulders like spun silver. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that the universal translator struggled to render into comprehensible English. "Greetings, human vessel Harmony's Edge. I am First Navigator Lirelai of House Stormwind, eldest daughter of the Triumvirate Council. We observe your distress and offer our assistance according to the ancient laws of void space hospitality." Jake stepped forward, grateful that the translator seemed to be handling the formal language better now. "Thank you, First Navigator. I'm Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, commanding officer of this vessel. We're experiencing multiple system failures and would appreciate any aid you can provide." The alien woman's large, luminous eyes, a striking violet color that seemed to hold depths like ocean water, focused on him with an intensity that made Jake slightly uncomfortable. Behind her, he noticed the other 2 Zephyrians exchange what looked like meaningful glances, their expressions unreadable to his human sensibilities. "Commander Morrison," Lyrely continued, her accent lending exotic music to his name. "The void laws require formal declaration of intent before assistance can be rendered between our peoples. Are you prepared to enter into a mutual aid compact, according to Zephyrian custom?" Jake hesitated for a moment, his training warring with the immediate need to save his ship and crew. Standard Alliance protocol discouraged entering into formal agreements with alien species without proper legal review. But emergency situations called for field commander discretion. His people needed help, and the Zephyrians were offering it. "I accept your offer of assistance," he said formally, trying to match the ceremonial tone the alien woman was using. "What do you need from me to formalize this agreement?" Lyrelay's expression brightened. At least, Jake thought it did. Reading Zephyrian emotions was still challenging for most humans. She gestured to one of her companions, who stepped forward, carrying what appeared to be an ornate tablet covered in flowing script that seemed to move and shift as he watched. "The compact requires your personal seal and spoken commitment," Lyrelay explained. A simple matter of placing your hand upon the bond tablet and declaring your acceptance of our aid. Once sealed, we will be bound by ancient law to render all possible assistance to your vessel and crew. The second Zephyrian moved closer, and Jake got his first good look at her. Where Lyrelai had an ethereal, almost regal bearing, this one radiated barely contained energy. Her skin held more of a golden undertone to its iridescence, and her silver hair was shorter, pulled back in what might have been a warrior's knot. Her eyes, when they met his, were a brilliant amber that seemed to burn with inner fire. "I am Second Navigator Zephyra," she said, her voice carrying less formal structure than her sister's, but no less authority. "Youngest of the council daughters and keeper of the void laws. The compact you undertake is sacred among our people, not to be entered into lightly." Jake nodded, appreciating the warning. "I understand the gravity of the situation. My primary concern is the safety of my crew." The third Zephyrian stepped forward then, completing what Jake was beginning to realize was probably some sort of formal triangle. This one was different again, where Lyrelai projected regality and Zephyra radiated energy. This third sister seemed to embody a quiet strength that reminded Jake of deep, still waters. Her skin's iridescence held hints of deep purple, and her silver hair fell in intricate braids adorned with what looked like small crystalline ornaments. "I am Third Navigator Nixara," she said, her voice soft but carrying an undertone that seemed to resonate in Jake's chest. "Middle daughter and keeper of the binding ways. The compact offered is more than simple aid. It creates obligations and opportunities that extend beyond this moment." Something in her tone made Jake pause. But another explosion somewhere in the ship's lower decks reminded him of the urgency of their situation. Emergency power was failing, and they had perhaps an hour before life support became critical. "I appreciate the warning," he said, "but my people need help now. What exactly does this compact entail?" Lyrelai exchanged another glance with her sisters before responding. "The Void Compact creates a bond of mutual obligation. We aid you in your time of need, and you become bound to the customs and courtesies of our people. It is an ancient law, predating the formation of our current government by millennia." Jake's tactical training told him to ask more questions, but Ensign Parker's voice cut through his deliberation. "Sir, we're losing atmospheric pressure on Deck 4. Hull breach is expanding." Decision made, Jake stepped forward to the ornate tablet. The surface felt warm under his palm, almost alive, and the flowing script seemed to pulse with bioluminescent light as he made contact. "I, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, commanding officer of the Alliance vessel Harmony's Edge, do formally accept the Void Compact offered by House Stormwind of the Zephyrian people. I pledge to honor your customs and laws in exchange for the aid you offer my vessel and crew." The moment his words stopped echoing in the bridge, several things happened at once. The tablet flared with brilliant light that seemed to flow up from its surface and over Jake's hand like liquid starlight. All three Zephyrian sisters suddenly went rigid, their eyes widening as they stared at him with expressions he couldn't interpret. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Jake felt something settle into place. A presence that hadn't been there before. Warm and oddly comforting. "By the ancient stars," Lyrelai whispered, her formal composure cracking for the first time. It's a true binding." "Impossible," Zephyra breathed, her amber eyes never leaving Jake's face. "Humans aren't capable of forming true void bonds. The council said their neural patterns were incompatible." Nixara said nothing, but Jake noticed her breathing had become rapid and shallow, her purple-tinged cheeks darkening with what might have been a blush. Jake said, pulling his hand back from the tablet, which continued to glow softly. "Is there a problem?" "Because my ship is still in trouble here." "No problem," Lyrelai said quickly, though her voice carried an odd strain. "No problem at all. We will render all aid immediately. Transport to our vessel will begin at once." Jake felt a moment of relief, but it was short-lived as he caught the looks the three sisters were giving each other, and him. There was something in their expressions, a mixture of shock, excitement, and what looked distinctly like competitive assessment, that made his survival instincts start tingling. "What exactly is a true binding?" he asked carefully. The sisters exchanged what was definitely a loaded look before Lyrelai answered with obvious reluctance. Among our people, the Void Compact can manifest in different ways. A simple aid bond creates temporary obligation. A deep bond creates lasting alliance between houses. But a true bond— She paused, seeming to struggle with the translation. A true bond is what your people might call a marriage contract. Jake felt the color drain from his face. A what now? Marriage, Nyxara said softly. Her violet eyes locked on his. According to Zephyrian law, you have just entered into a formal marriage contract with House Stormwind. But that's— Jake started. With all three of us, Zephyra interrupted, a predatory smile beginning to form on her lips. Collectively and individually, according to the ancient laws. You are bound to our house, and we are bound to you. Jake stared at them, his mind reeling. That's impossible. I was just accepting aid for my ship. The Void laws care nothing for intent, Lyrelai said, though she didn't sound entirely displeased by the situation. Only for the bond that forms, and the bond is— She closed her eyes, as if testing something internal. Very strong. Stronger than any recorded in our histories. Through his shock, Jake became aware that the warm presence in the back of his mind was growing stronger, and with it came flashes of something. Emotions that weren't his own, thoughts that carried alien perspectives, and underneath it all, a growing sense of connection to the three women standing before him. This is insane, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. I can't be married to 3 aliens I just met. You cannot be unmarried to us either, Zephyra pointed out with what sounded like amusement. The bond once formed is permanent, according to our laws. And since you accepted it willingly, even in ignorance, it carries full legal weight. Another explosion echoed through the ship, reminding Jake that regardless of his apparent marital status, his crew was still in danger. Can we discuss this after you save my ship? He asked desperately. Of course, Lyrelai said, suddenly all business again. The bond compels us to protect what is ours, after all. Your vessel, your crew, you. The way she said the last word sent an unexpected shiver down Jake's spine. The transport process was unlike anything Jake had experienced. Zephyrian technology seemed to work as much on biological principles as mechanical ones, and being enveloped in the shimmering field that carried him to their ship felt more like being embraced than being moved. He materialized in what was clearly the Starwind Dancer's medical bay, where his injured crew members were already being tended to by Zephyrian healers. Your people will be fully restored, Nyxara assured him, moving to his side with that same liquid grace all 3 sisters seemed to possess. Our biomedical technology can repair the damage caused by your ship's emergency systems failure. What caused the failure? Jake asked, grateful to focus on practical matters rather than his apparent marriage situation. Incompatible energy signatures, Zephyra explained, approaching from the other side. Jake noticed that somehow, despite the size of the medical bay, the 3 sisters had arranged themselves so that he was always surrounded by them. Your ship's artificial gravity generators created a resonance cascade with our vessel's biofields. An unfortunate accident. An accident that led to a most fortunate discovery, Lyrelai added, joining the group. The first true bond between our species in recorded history. Jake looked around at the 3 alien women who were apparently now his wives according to their law, and tried to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Through the growing connection in his mind, he could sense their emotions. Lyrelai's carefully controlled excitement, Zephyra's predatory satisfaction, and Nyxara's quiet but intense joy. This is all happening very fast, he said weakly. The void waits for no one, Zephyra said with a grin that revealed teeth slightly sharper than human norm. But do not worry, husband. We will teach you our ways. Speaking of which, Lyrelai interjected with a meaningful look at her sisters. There are certain protocols that must be observed. The bond may be formed, but it must be properly consummated, according to our traditions. Jake felt his face heating up. Consummated? Nothing improper, Nyxara assured him quickly, though her own cheeks had darkened again. Simply the formal recognition ceremonies. But there are questions of precedence to resolve. Precedence? Jake asked, though he was beginning to get a sinking feeling about where this was going. The order in which the individual bonds are confirmed, Lyra Lee explained. By rights, as eldest, I should nothing, Zephyra interrupted, her amber eyes flashing. The bond was formed through the void laws, which fall under my domain as keeper. Clearly, I have precedence. The binding ways supersede the void laws in matters of marriage, Nyxara said quietly, but with unmistakable firmness. As keeper of the binding ways, the precedence is mine. Jake watched in growing alarm as the three sisters began to square off with each other, their postures shifting into what looked like preparation for either formal debate or actual combat. The warm presence in his mind suddenly spiked with competing emotions: pride, jealousy, desire, and possessiveness from all three sources. Ladies, he said quickly, raising his hands, maybe we should— The matter will be decided according to ancient tradition, Lyra Lee declared, her regal bearing reasserting itself. Trial by contest, with our bonded as both prize and judge. Agreed, Zephyra said immediately, her predatory smile returning. I accept the challenge. As do I, Nyxara added, though she looked slightly less enthusiastic about the prospect. Jake stared at them. What kind of contest? The 3 trials of worthiness, Lyra Lee explained. Combat prowess, intellectual achievement, and— She paused, her iridescent skin darkening slightly. Intimate compatibility. I'm sorry, what was that last one? Do not worry, Zephyra purred, moving closer to him. That trial will be most educational for all involved. Through their mental bond, Jake felt a surge of anticipation from all 3 sisters that made his knees go weak. Whatever he had gotten himself into, it was clear that his life had just become infinitely more complicated. And despite his shock and confusion, he couldn't deny that part of him was looking forward to seeing how this played out. When do these trials begin? He asked, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. As soon as we reach the homeworld, Lyra Lee replied. The council must be informed of the bonding, and the trials must be conducted before the full assembly to be considered valid. How long until we reach your homeworld? 3 standard days, Nyxara said softly. 3 days to prepare. Jake nodded, trying to project more confidence than he felt. Through their bond, he sensed the sisters' approval of his apparent acceptance of the situation, along with growing currents of excitement and competitive determination. 3 days to figure out how he'd accidentally married 3 alien princesses, and how to survive the trials that would determine which one got him first. This was definitely not covered in the Alliance training manual. The guest quarters aboard the Starwind Dancer were unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The walls seemed to be grown rather than built, their organic curves flowing seamlessly into furniture that adjusted to his presence with subtle shifts in texture and support. Bioluminescent panels provided soft, warm lighting that somehow synchronized with his circadian rhythms, and the air itself carried a faint floral scent that seemed to ease the tension in his shoulders. Despite the alien luxury, sleep had been elusive. The mental bond with the 3 sisters had grown stronger overnight, and Jake found himself experiencing flashes of their dreams. Or perhaps they were experiencing his, images of soaring through crystal spires, ritual dances performed under twin moons, and more intimate moments that left him waking with his heart racing and his face burning. A soft chime indicated someone at his door, and Jake quickly pulled on the ceremonial robes that had been provided for him. The fabric felt like liquid silk, but seemed to regulate his body temperature automatically, adapting to his needs without conscious control. Enter, he called, and wasn't surprised when all 3 sisters glided into his quarters together. What did surprise him was their appearance. Gone were the formal diplomatic robes from the day before, replaced by what he could only describe as casual elegance. Their garments flowed around them like captured starlight, revealing more of their graceful forms while still maintaining an air of otherworldly sophistication. Good morning, husband, Lyra Lee said, the formal title sounding both natural and exotic in her melodic voice. We trust you rested well? Define well, Jake replied, noting how the sisters had arranged themselves in their characteristic triangle, a formation around him. Those dreams were intense. Zephyra's amber eyes sparkled with mischief. The bond strengthens during rest periods. Our subconscious minds learn to harmonize with each other. Quite educational, is it not? Educational is one word for it, Jake muttered, remembering some particularly vivid sequences involving all three sisters in scenarios that would definitely violate several Alliance regulations regarding fraternization with alien dignitaries. Today we begin your cultural preparation, Nixara explained, her soft voice carrying undertones that seemed to resonate in his chest. The trials cannot be conducted until you understand our ways, our laws, and the significance of what you have become part of. Jake settled into one of the responsive chairs, which immediately adjusted to support him perfectly. I have to admit, I'm curious about these trials. What exactly do they involve? The trial of strength tests combat prowess and physical capability, Lyra Lay began, moving to a wall panel that responded to her touch by displaying holographic images. Among our people, a bonded must be able to protect their family and house honor. The display showed Zephyrian warriors engaged in elegant dance-like combat, their movements flowing between hand-to-hand techniques and energy weapon manipulation with liquid grace. Jake noticed that the fighting style emphasized speed and precision over brute force, incorporating acrobatic elements that took advantage of their natural agility. Each of us will demonstrate our skills, Zephyra added, her tone carrying predatory satisfaction. And you will be tested as well. The bond enhances physical capabilities, but training and instinct matter more. Jake raised an eyebrow. I'll be fighting too? Not fighting, Nixara corrected gently. Dancing. Combat among bonded pairs is a form of intimate expression, attack and defense in perfect harmony. It reveals compatibility in ways that mere sparring cannot. The mental image that accompanied her words through their bond made Jake's breath catch. The combat dance she envisioned was indeed intimate, a flowing exchange of movements that blurred the line between martial arts and foreplay. The trial of mind tests intellectual compatibility and problem-solving ability, Lyrelai continued, shifting the display to show complex three-dimensional puzzles and mathematical constructs. Our society values mental acuity highly, and bonded partners must be able to challenge and support each other intellectually. This trial involves collaborative puzzle solving, Zephyra explained. Each sister presents a challenge that requires both her knowledge and your perspective to solve. The bond allows for shared thinking, but success depends on how well we can merge our cognitive approaches. Jake studied the holographic puzzles, noting elements that seemed to incorporate both scientific principles and artistic sensibilities. These look like they require understanding of your technology and culture. Which is why you require preparation, Nixara said, moving closer to him. We must teach you our history, our sciences, our arts. The next 2 days will be intensive. And the third trial? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew. All three sisters suddenly became very interested in various parts of the room, their iridescent skin darkening with what was definitely the Zephyrian equivalent of blushing. The trial of unity, Lyrelai said carefully, tests the depth and authenticity of the bond between partners. It involves physical and emotional intimacy designed to measure compatibility on the most fundamental levels. Specifically, Jake pressed, noting how their shared mental connection was practically humming with nervous energy. Shared sensory experience, Zephyra said bluntly, her warrior's directness cutting through the euphemisms. Physical union while maintaining mental bond. Each sister demonstrates how completely she can merge with your consciousness during intimate contact. Jake felt heat rising in his cheeks as their bond transmitted flashes of what such an experience might entail. Not just physical sensation, but shared emotion, merged awareness, consciousness flowing together like streams joining a river. I see, he managed. And the winner gets precedence? The winner, Nixara said softly, becomes first wife, with priority in all matters of house leadership and ceremony. The others become second and third, with their own honors and responsibilities. But the first wife guides the family structure. Jake was beginning to understand why this mattered so much to them. In a society as hierarchical as the Zephyrians, the distinction between first, second, and third wife would affect not just their relationship, but their entire social standing. "So," he said slowly, "you're competing not just for me, but for leadership of our family unit." "Exactly," Lyrelai confirmed. "Though do not think any of us will be casual in our efforts to win." The promise in her voice, echoed through their mental bond by all three sisters, sent a shiver of anticipation through Jake that he tried to suppress. "Let's start with the cultural preparation," he said, attempting to steer the conversation towards safer ground. The next several hours were a whirlwind of information, as the sisters took turns educating Jake in Zephyrian history, technology, and social customs. He learned that their people were descendants of an ancient nomadic species that had developed biotechnology to survive in the void between stars. Their ships, their tools, even their clothing were all living things bred and shaped for specific purposes. "Your human technology works through force and energy," Nyxara explained, as she guided him through an interactive display of Zephyrian biotechnology. "Ours works through harmony and biological resonance. We do not build machines. We grow partners." Jake found himself fascinated by their approach to problem-solving, which emphasized adaptation and symbiosis over domination and control. Their mathematics incorporated emotional variables alongside logical ones, creating solutions that accounted for the psychological impact of decisions on individuals and communities. "This is why the true bond with you is so remarkable," Lyrelai said as they reviewed historical records of human Zephyrian contact. "Most alien species can form basic communication bonds with us, but humans were believed incapable of the deep harmonization required for marriage bonds." "What makes me different?" Jake asked, though he suspected the answer would be complicated. "Your neural patterns," Zephyr explained, calling up a holographic display of brain scans that made Jake slightly uncomfortable. "Most humans show rigid, electrical pathways that resist external influence. But your mind is more fluid, more adaptive. Perhaps it is your military training, or perhaps you are simply unusual among your people." Through their bond, Jake felt their genuine curiosity about his psychological makeup, along with growing affection and possessiveness that was both flattering and slightly overwhelming. As the day progressed, he found himself learning not just facts, but experiencing Zephyrian culture through their shared consciousness. When Lyrelai explained their political structure, he felt her memories of council sessions, the weight of responsibility that came with her position as eldest daughter. When Zephyra demonstrated their combat techniques, he experienced the flow, state of perfect physical harmony that their warriors achieved. When Nyxara showed him their artistic traditions, he felt the emotional resonance that their music and visual arts created in Zephyrian minds. "Your adaptability is remarkable," Nyxara observed during a break in their lessons. "Most beings require weeks to adjust to mental sharing. You are integrating our perspectives within hours." "It helps that you're all present in my mind now," Jake admitted. "I can feel how the information fits into your understanding of the world. It's like having three brilliant tutors working together." "Do you find it overwhelming?" Lyrelai asked, genuine concern coloring her mental touch. "The bond can be reduced if the intensity becomes uncomfortable." Jake considered the question seriously. The constant presence of three alien consciousnesses in his mind should have been disturbing, but instead, it felt right. Like parts of himself he hadn't known were missing had suddenly been filled. "No," he said finally. "It feels natural. Like this is how I was supposed to be all along." The sisters exchanged meaningful glances, and through their bond Jake felt a surge of something that might have been relief, triumph, and deepening affection all rolled together. "The Council will be most interested in your adaptation rate," Zephyra said with satisfaction. "Such rapid integration suggests the bond is deeper than we initially realized." As evening approached, or what passed for evening aboard a ship that maintained its own artificial day-night cycle, Jake found himself genuinely excited about the cultural immersion process. Each sister brought her own perspective and expertise to his education, and their mental connection allowed for a level of understanding that no normal teaching method could achieve. "Tomorrow we begin physical preparation," Lyrelai announced as they shared what Zephyrians apparently considered dinner, a collection of foods that seemed to be more art than meal, each dish carefully balanced for both nutritional content and aesthetic appeal. "Physical preparation?" Jake asked around a bite of something that tasted like a cross between fruit and perfectly seasoned meat. Combat training, Zephyra said with obvious anticipation. The trial of strength requires that you demonstrate competency in our fighting techniques. We will teach you. All three of you? Naturally, Nyxara replied. Each of us specializes in different aspects of combat. Lyrelei excels in strategy and coordination, Zephyra in direct assault and weapons mastery, and I focus on defense and counterattack techniques. Jake felt a mix of excitement and apprehension flow through their bond. Learning alien combat techniques sounded fascinating, but doing so while maintaining mental connections with three competitive sisters who were also his wives promised to be challenging in ways he couldn't even begin to imagine. And after the physical training? He asked. Intellectual challenges, Lyrelei replied. Each of us will present you with problems that test how well you can integrate human and Zephyrian thinking approaches. That leaves the final day for... Jake trailed off. Final preparations, Nyxara said delicately, and preliminary compatibility assessments. The spike of anticipation and nervous energy that accompanied her words through their mental bond was enough to make Jake nearly choke on his drink. This is going to be an interesting few days, he managed. Indeed, Zephyra agreed with a predatory smile. Very interesting. As they finished their meal, Jake found himself studying his three alien wives with growing appreciation. Lyrelei's regal bearing masked a sharp intellect and surprising warmth. Zephyra's warrior directness concealed depths of loyalty and protective instinct. Nyxara's quiet demeanor hid passionate intensity and intuitive wisdom. Through their shared, mental connection, he could feel their individual personalities, their hopes and fears, their growing attachment to him. The bond that had seemed so overwhelming at first was becoming a source of strength, a feeling of completeness he'd never experienced before. Whatever challenges the trials might bring, Jake was beginning to think that accidentally marrying three alien princesses might be the best mistake he'd ever made. The only question now was which one would become his first wife, and whether he could survive the competition long enough to find out. Jake woke to the sensation of being gently shaken, though when his eyes opened he found himself alone in his quarters. The mental bond, he realized. One of the sisters was trying to wake him through their shared consciousness, rather than physical contact. The thoughtfulness of the gesture wasn't lost on him. Time for training, husband, came Zephyra's mental voice, warm with anticipation and tinged with predatory excitement. The combat deck awaits. Jake stretched, noting that his body felt different than it had the day before, stronger somehow, more flexible. Through their bond, he sensed the sisters' amusement at his discovery. The bond enhances physical capabilities, Lyrelei explained as he dressed in the form-fitting training garments that had been provided. Your body is adapting to match our enhanced physiology. By the time we reach the homeworld, you will be significantly stronger and faster than baseline human, and more durable, Nyxara added with a mental caress that made him shiver. Which is fortunate, given what we have planned for today. Jake made his way through the ship's organic corridors, still marveling at how the living walls seemed to pulse gently with their own heartbeat. The combat deck turned out to be a large circular chamber with a floor that felt springy under his feet, walls that could apparently reconfigure themselves for different training scenarios, and a ceiling that showed a holographic display of space outside the ship. All three sisters were waiting for him, and Jake's breath caught at the sight. They had traded their flowing ceremonial robes for training attire that was both practical and devastating. The garments were form-fitting but flexible, made from what looked like living mesh that moved with their bodies like a second skin. The effect emphasized their alien grace while providing obvious protection and mobility enhancement. "Good morning," he said, trying to keep his voice steady as their combined presence hit him through the mental bond. Excitement, determination, and an undercurrent of competitive tension that made the air practically hum with energy. "Today, you learn why Zephyrian warriors are feared throughout this sector of space," Zephyra said, moving to the center of the deck with fluid grace. "But first, you must understand that our combat philosophy differs fundamentally from human military doctrine." She gestured, and the deck's surface shifted, creating a raised platform surrounded by training equipment that seemed to grow from the floor itself. Human combat emphasizes overwhelming force, superior firepower, and tactical domination. Zephyrian combat is based on harmony, adaptation, and flowing with the natural energies of conflict. Natural energies? Jake asked. Every fight has a rhythm, Lyrelai explained, joining her sister on the platform. Patterns of attack and defense, advance and retreat, tension and release. Zephyrian warriors learn to feel these rhythms and become part of them, rather than fighting against them. To demonstrate, the two sisters began what Jake initially thought was a dance. Their movements were slow and graceful, circling each other with perfect synchronization. Then Lyrelai's hand moved toward Zephyra's shoulder, and Jake realized he was watching combat. Just combat performed with such fluid precision that it looked like choreography. Zephyra flowed away from the attack, her body bending in ways that seemed to defy human anatomy, then countered with a sweeping motion that Lyrelai met with a spinning deflection. They moved together like partners in a ballroom dance, each attack flowing seamlessly into defense, each defense becoming the setup for the next offensive movement. Beautiful, Jake breathed, and meant it. Through their mental bond, he could feel the sisters' satisfaction at his appreciation. Now watch with your enhanced senses, Nyxara said, moving to stand beside him. Feel the flow of their energy through our shared consciousness. Jake focused, and suddenly he could perceive the combat on multiple levels. Beyond the visible movements, he could sense the subtle shifts in balance, the micro-expressions that telegraphed intent, the way each sister anticipated and responded to the other's actions through instinct honed by centuries of training. I can feel their rhythm, he said in wonder. It's like music made physical. Exactly, Nyxara replied, her mental touch warm with approval. And now you must learn to join that music. Zephyra stepped back from her sister, turning to face Jake with a predatory smile. Your turn, husband. Show me what human military training has taught you. Jake moved onto the platform, immediately feeling the springy surface respond to his weight. His military combat training was extensive, covering everything from hand-to-hand fighting to advanced weapons techniques, but he had a feeling that none of it would prepare him for this. Standard defensive position, he said, settling into a balanced stance that would allow him to respond to attacks from multiple directions. Zephyra circled him slowly, and Jake felt his enhanced awareness tracking her movements. She moved like a predator, all fluid grace and barely contained power. When she struck, it was without warning, a lightning-fast jab toward his midsection that he barely managed to block. Good reflexes, she commented, not even breathing hard. But you are fighting the rhythm instead of joining it. She attacked again, this time with a combination of strikes that flowed together like water. Jake found himself falling back, his military training focusing on deflection and counterattack. But every time he tried to launch an offensive of his own, Zephyra simply wasn't there. You are thinking too much, Lyrelai observed from the sidelines. Combat is not a chess game to be solved through analysis. It is a conversation between bodies, a negotiation between energies. Feel what I feel, came Zephyra's mental voice as she launched another flowing assault. Stop trying to defeat me and start trying to dance with me. Jake forced himself to relax, opening his mind fully to the mental bond. Suddenly he could sense Zephyra's intentions a split second before she acted, feel the rhythm of her movements as if it were music. When she swept toward his legs, he found himself flowing upward in a leap that carried him over her attack. When she spun to follow his movement, he was already turning to meet her, their bodies moving in harmony, rather than opposition. Better, Zephyra purred, her amber eyes bright with approval. Much better. They continued for several minutes, and Jake found himself falling into the alien rhythm of Zephyrian combat. It was less about defeating an opponent, and more about becoming part of a larger dance, reading and responding to energy flows that existed as much in the mind as in the physical world. When they finally broke apart, Jake was breathing hard, but felt energized rather than exhausted. Through their bond, he could feel Zephyra's satisfaction, and something deeper, a growing respect and attraction that made his pulse quicken. My turn, Lyrelai announced, stepping onto the platform. Zephyra teaches the warrior's path, direct engagement and personal prowess. I will show you the strategist's approach. The deck around them shifted, creating obstacles and barriers that transformed the simple platform into a complex, three-dimensional battleground. Holographic opponents materialized at various points, their forms shifting between different alien species Jake didn't recognize. Combat is rarely one-on-one, Lyrelai explained as she moved through the obstacle course with fluid precision. A true warrior must be able to coordinate with allies, manipulate the environment, and think several moves ahead while maintaining perfect physical execution. She demonstrated by engaging multiple holographic opponents simultaneously, using the barriers and obstacles to her advantage while maintaining awareness of threats from all directions. Her movements were just as fluid as Zephyra's, but more calculated, each action serving a larger tactical purpose. "Your turn," she said, gesturing for Jake to join her in the maze of obstacles. This proved even more challenging than the one-on-one combat. Jake found himself having to think and move simultaneously, coordinating his physical actions with tactical analysis while maintaining the flowing rhythm that Zephyrian combat required. More than once he found himself trapped between obstacles or caught off guard by opponents attacking from unexpected angles. "Trust the bond," Lyrelai's mental voice whispered as he struggled with a particularly complex scenario. "Let me share my perspective. See through my eyes as well as your own." Jake opened his mind fully to her consciousness, and suddenly his tactical awareness expanded dramatically. Through Lyrelai's enhanced perception, he could track multiple opponents simultaneously, predict their movement patterns, and identify environmental advantages he would have missed on his own. Working together, through their mental link, they cleared the obstacle course with elegant efficiency. Jake provided human tactical insight and adaptive thinking, while Lyrelai contributed strategic planning and environmental awareness. The combination proved devastatingly effective. "Remarkable," Lyrelai breathed as they finished. "Your tactical mind complements mine perfectly. Together we see possibilities that neither could achieve alone." Through their bond, Jake felt her genuine amazement and growing respect. But underneath it was something else. A deep, possessive satisfaction that made him realize how important this competition was to her. "Now for the true test," Nyxara said, stepping onto the platform as it reconfigured itself once again. "Defense and counterattack. The art of turning an opponent's strength against them." Unlike her sisters, Nyxara didn't demonstrate with flashy displays of offensive capability. Instead, she stood in the center of the platform and waited. When holographic opponents attacked her from multiple directions, she barely seemed to move. But somehow, each attacker ended up off balance, overextended, or redirected into collisions with their allies. "The greatest strength is knowing when not to use force," she explained as Jake watched in fascination. "Every attack creates vulnerabilities. Every aggressive action can be turned back on itself. This is the deepest level of Zephyrian combat philosophy." When Jake joined her on the platform, she guided him through exercises that felt more like meditation than fighting. She taught him to sense the flow of energy in an opponent's attack, to find the minimal touch required to redirect that energy, to use an attacker's momentum against them. "Feel my mind," she whispered through their bond as they worked together against multiple holographic opponents. "Sense how I perceive each attack not as a threat, but as an opportunity." Through Nyxara's consciousness, Jake experienced a completely different approach to combat. Where Zephyra fought with passionate intensity, and Lyrelai with calculated precision, Nyxara moved with serene confidence, turning violence into grace, aggression into art. Working with her mental guidance, Jake found himself deflecting attacks with minimal effort, redirecting force with subtle touches, creating openings in his opponent's defenses without aggressive action. It was the most alien of the three combat styles, requiring a fundamental shift in how he thought about conflict. "Perfect," Nyxara said softly, as they completed the exercise. "You have learned to find stillness within motion, peace within conflict. This is the highest achievement of our warrior tradition." Her mental touch was warm with approval and something deeper, a profound satisfaction that seemed to resonate in his soul. Through their bond, Jake felt her quiet joy at sharing this part of herself with him. As the training session concluded, Jake found himself sweating and energized, his body humming with new capabilities while his mind processed three distinctly different approaches to combat. Each sister had shared not just techniques, but fundamental aspects of their worldview, their approach to challenges and conflict. "Tomorrow, we test your intellectual capabilities," Lyreley announced as they moved toward the deck's exit. "Today proved you can adapt to our physical disciplines. Now we must see if your mind is equally flexible." The trials begin the day after. "We arrive," Zephyra added, her amber eyes gleaming with competitive fire. "Each of us will demonstrate our mastery in formal combat before the council. Then you will be tested to prove your worthiness as our bonded. And the winner of the combat trial gains advantage in the final selection," Nyxara said quietly. "The one who performs best in the trial of strength will have priority in the trial of unity." Jake felt a surge of competitive determination flow through all three sisters simultaneously, their individual personalities united in their desire to claim first position in their marriage bond. The intensity of their shared ambition was both exciting and slightly intimidating. "May the best sister win," he said diplomatically. "Oh, I intend to," Zephyra replied with a predatory grin. "As do I," Lyreley added with regal confidence. "We shall see," Nyxara said softly. But through their bond, Jake felt the steel beneath her gentle words. As they made their way back to their respective quarters, Jake couldn't help but marvel at what had happened to his life. 3 days ago, he had been a simple military officer on a routine diplomatic mission. Now he was married to 3 alien princesses, learning combat techniques that bordered on the supernatural, and preparing for trials that would determine the structure of his family for the rest of his life. Through their shared mental connection, he felt the sisters' growing affection for him, their respect for his adaptability, and their fierce determination to prove themselves worthy of his love. The competition between them was real and intense, but underneath it was something deeper, a shared commitment to making their unusual marriage work, regardless of who emerged as the first wife. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they tested his intellectual capabilities. But tonight, Jake found himself looking forward to whatever came next. For the first time in his life, he felt truly complete, surrounded by brilliant, beautiful, and dangerous women who had somehow become the missing pieces of his soul. The only question was whether he would survive the experience with his sanity intact. The Zephyrian homeworld of Astrolith hung before them like a living jewel, its surface swirling with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the planet's twin moons. Jake stood at the observation deck's crystalline window, watching as they approached the massive orbital stations that surrounded the world like protective guardians. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Lyreley said, joining him at the window. Her formal, diplomatic robes had been replaced by ceremonial attire that seemed to capture and reflect the planet's glow. 5 billion years of evolution guided by conscious will rather than random chance. Through their mental bond, Jake felt her deep love for her homeworld, along with nervous anticipation about the trials that awaited them. The intellectual challenges of the previous day had gone better than expected. Jake's human perspective had provided unique solutions to problems that had stumped Zephyrian scholars for decades. But now came the real test. "The council has assembled," Zephyra announced, approaching with barely contained excitement. Her warrior's attire was more practical than her sister's, designed for movement and combat, but no less striking. Representatives from all 7 houses, plus observers from 12 allied species. This bonding has attracted more attention than any in recorded history. "No pressure," Jake muttered, feeling the weight of expectation through their shared consciousness. "You will do magnificently," Nyxara assured him, her gentle touch on his arm sending warmth through their bond. "We have all felt your capabilities through our connection. The trials will simply demonstrate to others what we already know." The landing process was unlike anything in Jake's experience. Rather than mechanical docking procedures, the Starwind dancer seemed to grow into the orbital station, biomechanical interfaces forming seamless connections that made ship and station temporarily one organism. Jake found himself wondering if anything in Zephyrian society existed in isolation, or if everything was designed for connection and integration. The station's interior was breathtaking, vast chambers with walls that shifted between transparency and opacity, allowing views of the planet below or privacy as needed. Bioluminescent gardens provided both beauty and air purification, while the corridors themselves seemed to guide visitors toward their destinations through subtle changes in lighting and texture. "The trial chambers await," Lyrelay said as they made their way through halls filled with Zephyrians in ceremonial dress. Jake noticed how other beings, some humanoid, others decidedly alien, watched their procession with obvious fascination. But first, we must appear before the council for formal recognition of the bonding. The council chamber was enormous, its curved walls rising toward a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of space around the station. Hundreds of Zephyrians filled tiered seating that surrounded a central platform, their combined presence creating a mental resonance that Jake could feel even without direct connection. At the chamber's apex sat 7 figures in robes that seemed to be woven from captured starlight, the heads of the 7 great houses. Jake's enhanced awareness immediately identified the central figure as someone of immense authority and age, her silver hair flowing like liquid metal and her eyes holding depths that spoke of centuries of experience. Matriarch Celestine, Lyrelay, whispered through their bond. Head of the council and keeper of the ancient laws, my grandmother. The formal presentations took over an hour, with each sister recounting the circumstances of their bonding and the unprecedented nature of Jake's integration into their society. When called upon to speak, Jake found himself drawing on everything he'd learned about Zephyrian customs and values. Honored matriarch, esteemed council members, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I stand before you not as a conqueror or stranger, but as one who has been welcomed into your family through bonds I never imagined possible. The connection I share with Lyrelay, Zephyra, and Nyxara has shown me that humanity and Zephyrians are not separate species struggling to coexist, but complementary halves of a greater whole. Through their mental bond, he felt his wives' pride and approval, along with surprised respect from various council members. When he finished speaking, Matriarch Celestine studied him with ancient eyes before speaking. The bonding is recognized as valid and binding, she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Jake's bones. Let the trials commence to determine precedence among the bonded sisters. The trial of strength took place, in an arena that seemed to grow from the station's living structure, its walls transparent to allow viewing from multiple levels. Jake watched in fascination and growing arousal as each of his wives demonstrated their combat mastery before the assembled crowd. Lyrelay moved like a general commanding invisible armies, her opponents falling to precisely coordinated attacks that seemed to anticipate their every move. Her display emphasized tactical brilliance and strategic thinking, turning the arena itself into a weapon through environmental manipulation. Zephyra fought with passionate intensity that left the crowd gasping, her flowing movements devastating in their efficiency. She faced multiple opponents simultaneously, her blade work creating patterns of light that were as beautiful as they were deadly. When she finished, several council members were openly applauding. Nyxara's demonstration was perhaps the most impressive of all. She stood motionless as attackers converged on her from all directions, then moved with minimal effort to redirect their energy back upon them. Her opponents defeated themselves through her subtle manipulations, leaving her untouched in the center of a circle of fallen adversaries. When Jake's turn came, he found himself facing a holographic opponent that adapted to match his capabilities. Drawing on everything the sisters had taught him, he flowed between their 3 combat styles, using Zephyra's aggressive techniques to create openings, Lyrelay's tactical thinking to exploit advantages, and Nyxara's redirection methods to turn his opponent's strength against them. The crowd's response was electric. Through his bond with the sisters, Jake felt their amazement at how completely he had integrated their teachings, creating a hybrid fighting style that incorporated the best aspects of each approach. The trial of mind proved equally challenging. Each sister presented puzzles that required both Zephyrian knowledge and human perspective to solve. Jake found himself working through problems that involved biological engineering, quantum harmonics, and social dynamics that spanned multiple species. What surprised him most was how naturally he and each sister worked together during their individual challenges. Their mental bond allowed for a level of intellectual collaboration that neither human nor Zephyrian scholars had achieved before, creating solutions that were truly greater than the sum of their parts. By the time the intellectual trials concluded, Jake could sense the council's amazement through the general mental resonance in the chamber. The bonding between human and Zephyrian wasn't just possible, it was revolutionary, opening possibilities that neither species had imagined. The final trial, Matriarch Celestine announced as the sun set over the planet below, will be conducted in private, according to ancient custom. The bonded will withdraw to the Unity Chamber, where the depth and authenticity of their connections will be tested. Jake felt his pulse quicken as they were escorted to a smaller chamber deep within the station. The Unity Chamber was intimate and warm, its walls pulsing gently with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to their emotional states. A circular platform in the center was surrounded by flowing curtains that could provide privacy while still allowing the monitoring equipment to function. The trial measures neurological synchronization during intimate contact, Lyreley explained, her formal demeanor slipping to reveal nervous anticipation. Each sister will attempt to achieve complete mental unity with you, while maintaining physical connection. The deepest level of bonding our people are capable of, Zephyra added, her amber eyes bright with desire and competitive determination. Whoever achieves the strongest synchronization wins precedence. But remember, Nyxara said softly, this is not just a competition. It is a celebration of what we have become together. Jake looked at his 3 wives, for that's truly what they were now, regardless of the trial's outcome, and felt overwhelmed by the love and trust flowing through their shared bond. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Lyreley stepped forward first, her movements graceful and sure. As eldest, I claim the right of first trial. Their connection during the intimate portion of the trial was everything Jake had imagined and more. Lyreley's mental touch was like starlight given form, precise and brilliant and overwhelming in its intensity. As their bodies joined in ancient rhythm, their consciousness merged until Jake could no longer distinguish between his thoughts and hers. Through the monitoring equipment, he was dimly aware that their synchronization was reaching levels the Council had never recorded. When Zephyra took her turn, the experience was completely different, but equally intense. Her passionate nature translated into a mental connection that burned like controlled fire, wild and dangerous and intoxicating. Their unity was marked by fierce joy and protective possessiveness that left them both gasping and trembling in the aftermath. Nyxara's trial surprised him most of all. Her gentle demeanor concealed depths of sensuality that caught him completely off guard. Their mental merger was like sinking into warm, dark water, peaceful on the surface but with powerful currents underneath. The monitoring equipment actually overloaded during their peak synchronization, unable to measure the depth of their connection. As they lay together afterward, all 4 of them intertwined on the chamber's responsive platform. Jake felt more complete than he had ever imagined possible. Through their shared consciousness, he experienced each sister's love, their individual personalities, their hopes for their future together. The measurements are unprecedented, came Matriarch Celestine's voice through the chamber's communication system. Never in our recorded history has any bonding achieved such levels of synchronization. But the trial requires a victor. Jake felt his wives tense slightly, their competitive instincts warring with their shared satisfaction. Through their bond, he suddenly understood what he needed to do. Honored Matriarch, he said, sitting up with the sisters still arranged around him. I request the right to address the Council before the judgment is rendered. A pause then. Granted. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the sisters' curiosity and support through their connection. The measurements show which sister achieved the highest synchronization with me. But they cannot measure something more important, that my bond with each of them is perfect and complete in its own way. Lyreley is my intellectual equal and strategic partner. Zephyra is my warrior companion and passionate heart. Nyxara is my spiritual center and emotional anchor. He looked at each of them in turn, seeing understanding begin to dawn in their beautiful alien eyes. Rather than competing for precedence, I propose that we create something new, a marriage bond based on equality rather than hierarchy. Let us be partners rather than ranked wives, each contributing our unique strengths to our family unit. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then Lyreley began to smile, her mental touch warm with approval. A revolutionary proposal, abandoning thousands of years of tradition for something unprecedented. Dangerous, Zephyra added, but her grin showed she was intrigued rather than concerned. Our society will need time to accept such a radical change. Beautiful, Nyxara whispered, tears streaming down her face. A bond of true equals, united in love rather than divided by rank. Through their shared consciousness, Jake felt their unanimous agreement, their excitement at the possibility of creating something new together. "The council will deliberate," Matriarch Celestine announced, though Jake thought he detected approval in her ancient voice. 3 hours later, they stood before the full council once again, this time holding hands in a chain that symbolized their equal partnership. The matriarch rose from her seat, her expression grave but her eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. "In 5,000 years of recorded law, no bonding has ever been declared equal rather than hierarchical," she announced. "But these are unprecedented circumstances, requiring unprecedented solutions. The Council recognizes the marriage bond between Jake Morrison and the Sisters of House Stormwind as valid, binding, and equal in all respects." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs and scattered applause. Through their bond, Jake felt his wife's joy and relief, along with their determination to make their revolutionary marriage a success. "Furthermore," the matriarch continued, "this bonding opens new possibilities for human Zephyrian cooperation. The genetic compatibility you have demonstrated, combined with your remarkable mental synchronization, suggests that our species' futures may be more intertwined than we ever imagined." As they left the council chamber, Jake found himself surrounded by beings from multiple species, all eager to learn more about the unprecedented bonding. But through it all, his focus remained on his 3 wives, their mental presence a constant source of strength and joy. "So," he said as they finally returned to their quarters aboard the Starwind Dancer, "what happens now?" "Now we go home," Lyralee said, settling into his arms with a contented sigh. "To Earth first, to inform your people of what has transpired. Then back here to begin our life together. Our children will be the first true human Zephyrian hybrids," Zephyra added, her hand resting on his chest as she curled against his side. "Bridges between our species in ways we can barely imagine. And our love will be the foundation for a new kind of family," Nyxara finished, completing their intimate circle, equal partners in all things, bound by choice rather than convention. Through their shared consciousness, Jake felt the depth of their commitment, their love, their excitement for the future they would build together. He had set out on a simple diplomatic mission and ended up with 3 wives, a revolutionary marriage, and the responsibility of helping to shape the future relationship between 2 species. It was, he reflected, definitely the best accidental marriage in galactic history. As their ship began its journey back toward human space, Jake Morrison closed his eyes and let himself sink into the warm glow of his wife's mental presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As equals, as partners, and as a family united by love rather than tradition. The future had never looked brighter. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.